All right, good morning. My name is Felice Knowles, and I work for Diane at the Bahamas Marine Mammal Research Organization. Today I'm going to share with you valuable information that we are getting from our manatees here in the Bahamas, and I'd like to note that all of this work is being done in collaboration with the United States Geological Survey Sirenia Project. Currently, we have 8 manatees in our ID catalog for the manatees, and basically we look at the scar patterns on them, and that's the way we can get them in the catalog. But as you can see from this map, we have about 5 to 7 other manatees that are not in that catalog, and that's simply because we haven't received enough information to input them in. But what I'd like to note is 3 of our manatees were actually documented in Florida before they came to the Bahamas. And 3 of the manatees that I'm going to be talking about today were actually radio tagged, and we actually followed their movements to get this information. First, I'm going to talk to you about Rita and Georgie. Rita is a manatee that was documented in Florida from 1993 to 2009. And then she came over to the Bahamas, and she spent her time in Spanish Wells, but what was surprising was she came over here pregnant, and in 2010 she had a baby, and the baby was named Georgie, so that is the baby right there. But they didn't have the best of luck. So in Spanish Wells, a hurricane passed, and they actually moved because they didn't want to stay during the hurricane. But they ended up in one of the worst places for them. Anybody know where this is? Nassau Harbor, very good. So they ended up in Nassau Harbor. If anyone knows anything about manatees, you know that a lot of boat traffic is not good. So the Department of Marine Resources decided this was not safe for them, and they were actually captured and held at Atlantis for a few months. Some research was done at Great Harbor Key, and this is where we released the manatees. But during the release, we had to tag them because we wanted to monitor their health to make sure that they were suitable for the wild and that they stayed healthy. So in this photo, you can see Jim Reid. He's one of the biologists in Florida who does a lot of the manatee work. He designed the tag, and a lot of people think that the tag is a little dangerous for the manatees, but I just want to explain the tag design so that everyone can understand that it is actually safe. So the tag was designed with 2 breaking points. The belt itself, if it got caught, it has a breaking point right here, and it will break if they got caught into something. But the belt is also designed to break after a year or 2. So it's designed already to break off, and it isn't a long period tag. Also, if the top tether got caught, the blue buoy, the top also will break off, so it's a safe tag for the manatees. And then they're like, but does it slow them down? Is it heavy? Manatees can get up to 2 tons, and Rita's in the photo on the right. She's a full-grown female, and her tag is maybe 5 pounds or even less, so it really doesn't bother them at all. So both of them were tagged, and a lot of research was done in Great Harbor Key, Berry Islands. And that research was done there because manatees were already there, and we knew that it was suitable for them to be released, and that's how the organization got the okay to actually let them go. So they were released in Great Harbor Key, and this map shows their movements over a 3-month period. And if you take a look, this is the Berry Islands, and this is North Andros. They negotiated a lot of local habitats. They even traveled down to North Andros, which is about 80 kilometers away. And they stayed on the bank for most of this travel, but they did it numerous times, but they always returned back to Great Harbor Key. This was in April of 2012, and a few months later in June, the tag information showed some really cool information. When manatees turn 2, they wean from their parents, so that means they're now independent. So Georgie actually left her mom, but the tag showed that she stayed in the Great Harbor Key area, and she traveled up and down utilizing the habitat. But what was really cool was she actually went out and did an exploratory oceanic trip. Even though the tag data shows 2 trips, the timing on the data points, it proves that it's only 1. So she did it once. So she was using the same habitat that her mom showed her, but she was also exploring new parts as well. A few months later, in September, Georgie did something really remarkable. She actually moved from the Berry Islands, which is right here, and she took an oceanic trip across to North Abaco. So this is a crossing of about 100 kilometers with a deep water crossing of about 50 kilometers. So she left Berry Islands, and she spent about 5 days in the marls. Ryan spoke about the marls yesterday. It has an abundance of seagrass and mangroves, so very, very shallow. It's very manatee friendly, and there may be also some freshwater blue holes. So she spent about 5 days in the marls, And then she went up to the northern tip of Abaco. But unfortunately, up there, her tag malfunctioned, so we had to utilize public sighting data to track her from the northern tip of Abaco around the east coast, and she actually then stopped in Cherokee Sound. As you can see from this photo, Cherokee Sound is a large protected area. There's an abundance of seagrass as well, and there are also mangrove areas, but there are also some freshwater blue holes. There's one over here in this canal and one right over here in this area, and Georgie was observed utilizing those, but Georgie does not have the best luck at all. So another hurricane came, and Georgie actually had to be recaptured again because she had taken refuge in that canal that I showed you, and in the canal is a lot of residents, and people love to feed manatees and give them water, but a lot of time this human interaction and this intervention actually is not good for the manatees, and they fed her and they gave her water, and she stopped feeding on her own. And after a few months, the organization received photos, and they realized that she actually lost a significant amount of weight. So she had to be recaptured. She was held again on Atlantis. This is her getting her lettuce, so she had to get fattened right back up. And then she was released after a few months back to Great Harbor Key because this is where all the research was done and we knew it was a suitable manatee habitat. So she continued to utilize the area again, but she took some western movements this time about 120 kilometers offshore. But Georgie was like, this place is cool, but I really want to go back to that new place I found. So Georgie left, and she ended up back in Cherokee Sound. But during this trip, she didn't have the tag on, so we weren't sure how she got from Berry Islands to Cherokee Sound. But in the first trip, I don't know if you remember, I said that we got public sightings along the east coast because it's very popular, a lot of boats. During the second trip, we didn't get any public sightings of Georgie, so it is a possibility that she went from the Berry Islands and she took the short way right around the southern tip. But because we don't have the tag data, we're not too sure. But we assume that that's a possibility that she did that. And keep in mind that on both of these trips, she was only 2, and at this trip, she was about 2.5. So it's really remarkable that she actually did this oceanic crossing. This was actually the first deep water crossing ever recorded by a manatee. And Georgie is still utilizing this area as we speak. But what is really cool is she's actually been observed drinking fresh water from the Sirenia Canal and this blue hole over here. She spends a lot of time over there. And this is the first and only recording of a manatee in the Bahamas drinking from a natural freshwater source. So this is pretty remarkable. So Georgie is still hanging in this area here, but she's now fully independent, so she doesn't get too much human interaction, and she's actually not approaching humans. So she's a big girl now. She's learned her lesson. And her mom, Rita, she actually stayed in the Berry Islands, and she's actually now in the North Andros area. So if you ever hear about a fresh creek manatee, that's Rita. But unlike Georgie, she is friendly, so she's getting a lot of Facebook time as well. Our next manatee that we tagged was Gina. And a little history on Gina. Gina was documented in Florida from 1993 to 1998, and then she moves over in the Bahamas in 1999. Gina spent a lot of time in the Berry Islands. Since she's been in the Bahamas, she's already had 4 calves, and she spent 14 years in the Berry Islands, so she is well known. But one day she decided, it's time for a move, so she took a long journey over to North Eleuthera. It was a full trip, about 120 kilometers, with a deep water crossing of 81 kilometers, and this is the second deep water crossing recorded here in the Bahamas, so this is also new information. Gina really knows this area well. She spends a lot of time in Spanish Wells and Harbor Island, so this is her tracks over a 3-month period. And the Spanish Wells Inlet is a hot spot for her because there's lots of vegetation and there's also water that she can get, but she gets hers from people. She's a people lover. And the same thing over here in Harbor Island. But what we learned from Gina that was really cool was this. She made 2 oceanary exploratory trips. She went about 30 kilometers offshore, but the depths out there were about 3,000 meters deep. So it was pretty weird to see her actually go out and explore the ocean and come back. And if you take a look at one of her trips, on her way out, She went out, but she almost took the exact same route coming back in. So it was pretty cool to see that manatees can actually navigate in deep water, because a lot of scientists think they use the depth gradient to move. But with this deep water, she had to use some other source of navigation to actually know her way back. But Gina didn't stop there. On February 1st of 2016, we had to capture Gina and her calf, Sail. Sail is about 8 months now, but Sail actually got some fishing line caught around her right flipper, and we actually had to capture to take it off because it got in really deep and we wanted to prevent infection. So we caught them February 1st, and we had a very successful capture, and we took the line off and she got treated. And they were released right here in the Spanish Wells area. We watched them after they were released. And we put a tag on Gina so that we could know the whereabouts, because we wanted to monitor Sail's flipper to make sure it didn't get infected and that she was healing properly, because she's still very young. This is their tracks over a 10-day period. They left Spanish Wells. They went over to Harbor Island, went back to Spanish Wells, came around. They went down the Hatchet Bay area, came back up. And then this is where it got a little weird. They went offshore a little, right here to the edge. And then they went back up and they went offshore again. So we were like, wonder what Gina's doing. Wonder if Sail's okay, if Sail's still with her. But it didn't stop there. For the next 2 to 3 days, Gina kind of gave us all a little heart attack. Our tag data showed them out here in the ocean in the middle of the tongue, and we were like, uh-oh, is the tag off? Is Sail still with Gina? Because the tag was moving at a speed that showed that it was still attached to the manatee. So next 2 to 3 days, we were like, are they going to go to Abaco? Are they going to go to the Very Islands? But boom, they showed up in New Providence. That was a big surprise because I was on call waiting to go and see them, but they actually came to me. So it was really funny. I was like, thanks, Gina, but I prefer to come to you. So they came to New Providence. They were first seen in Stewart's Cove area down here, and then they spent a lot of time in Albany, and they also went and visited Mr. Malis' place because it's so cool, so they spent a few days there chilling out, getting some good treatment. But those two girls have been along the southwest coast, and they also looped up because they've already been to Sandy Port, Atlantis Marina, and they've been seen at the Ocean Club as well. But when they get up in that area, we get really nervous because that's the Nassau Harbor. Gina's a mom with a calf, and it's very busy because the good weather is coming. The last sighting I got was the Ocean Club sighting, so if you hear anything, please come and let me know. I'd like to know where my girls are. So that's good information that we got from tags. And now the next manatee I want to talk to you about is black-beard. Black-beard was a manatee first documented in Tampa Bay, Florida, so over on the west coast of Florida. And then he moved over. So he came over in 2012. He was first sighted in Long Island, so we're not sure how he got this way. And then he was sighted in Cat Island. Then he went up to North Eleuthera. Then he's like, I'm going to visit Nassau. When he came to New Providence, he actually circumnavigated the island at least twice within 3 months. So he actually went all around Nassau. He was seen everywhere. Everybody knew there's a manatee in Nassau. Then he went back over to Eleuthera, and then he came back to Nassau. Now, anybody want to guess maybe why he was spending time in Eleuthera? Spanish Wells area. There you go. Gina was over there. So we do think that Blackbeard might be Sail's father. But after he came back to New Providence, I didn't hear from him for about a month. So I was like, oh my goodness, where's Blackbeard? I got a report here of a Bridges Bay manatee, and the manatee had 2 scars over the eye. So I was like, oh, that could be a new manatee, but I didn't get enough photos to determine that. And then I got a photo from Crown Haven determining that it was Blackbeard, and he got 2 scars over the eyes, so he possibly got hit. And then he did that deep water crossing. So this is the 3rd deep water crossing of a manatee that survived this trip. But he didn't stop there. He was like, Freeport's pretty cool. He met up with another manatee. We think it was a lady. And then he came back to Abaco, so I'm not sure where he is now. But the biggest part about all of this information here is Blackbeard was never tagged. So we got it all from public sightings, and it shows that outreach and public help in research is very important because that's how we actually got all of this information, and it's proving a lot for manatee science. My Facebook club, the Bahamas Manatee Club, is proving to be a very helpful tool in outreach and education and also receiving manatee sightings because I can't go to all of the islands, but this allows all of the islands to come to me. And I also get to teach a lot of manatee education and manatee conservation. So it's been a really helpful tool. And this is one of the ways that we can use social media in science to actually better our outreach and also to get information from the public and get them involved. So what we found is basically that the Bahamas has a diversity and abundance of seagrass for these manatees to survive. We've also found that there are natural, but they're limited freshwater sources, and there are a lot of artificial freshwater for these manatees. And we noticed that our manatees are making these rare deep water crossings that can actually put in for the future of population dispersal, so the Bahamas could actually be a lovely environment for a manatee population. In the future, we'd like to study these freshwater sources. We want to see how many there are. We're not sure how many natural freshwater sources we do have, and we're actually right now speaking to Dr. Dr. Kant, about working with a freshwater study to actually visit these islands to see how many freshwater sources these manatees do have and if they're usable for them. And then after we do that, we'd like to see how many manatees are actually using the freshwater sources rather than the artificial sources. So I'd like to thank the USGS for their ongoing help with the study, Disney for funding, Atlantis Blue Project for funding, and the Save the Manatee Club. They also fund, but they also provide us with some manatee caution signs, and they're very, very helpful. And that's our organization. So if you see that logo, that's us, Sandy Point. And lastly, my last slide is just my question slide, but this is Sail. And if you can see her flipper here, that's where the line was wrapped around, but if you can see, the skin is growing back, so she does have a little bit of scarring, but it's looking excellent. And when she didn't have the line, she didn't want anybody near her. She wasn't moving it, but she's actually using her flipper now. She's moving it all around. I wanted to include a video, but I know I'd go over my time. So if you want to see more about Sail, you can check us out on Facebook at the Bahamas Manatee Club. And if you want any of these real cool manatee t-shirts, you can check us out downstairs. Thank you, everyone.